Well, it's been a long time. Welcome back to a 78 Camaro video. Lots happened. It's kind of cold out. I'm sure you can hear the heaters running. But we've got a fuel tank here. I think we're going to go ahead and pull that out and get that assembled. I know I've shown these in the past. Maybe I'll even grab a tripod and we'll show you how to set them up. It's not that complicated. You know, especially if you've done a whole bunch of them. So we're probably going to have to push this back, but we'll see how long it takes to get the tank set up. So let's go ahead and set up a nice little workbench and get started. Ignore the rattle, but you can see we just popped that open. We got straps, which, you know, sorry tanks, I've never actually had a set of your straps fit anything. You know, so hopefully, and then hopefully in here there's, yeah, we got miscellaneous stuff, pump. Okay, we'll get everything out. Okay, so we did get the correct pump. We've got a generic, you know, the GM 0 to 90 and the tank, and we couldn't help but notice that they sent this as a two-piecer, so that's different, but might make it a lot easier for us to install. We'll find out. Hopefully you can see, but this is why I like the fuel-injected tanks instead of modifying your stock tank whenever possible. As you notice, there's a basket in there that the fuel pump will sit in. So on hard cornering or anything, fuel will still be around that as it's sloshing to the back or to the side or whatever, so that you don't starve your pump. Okay, so one of the things we're doing now is just kind of gathering everything together. And even though I've done this a bunch of times, I always use their little chart. So you take your measurement. Right here, I've got 8 9/16 from this lip down, so I'll write that down. And then when we go to start cutting all of this and getting all of this to height, you can see here, we'll be making some measurements and figuring out exactly where we need all that to be. We'll cut all these tubes. We'll get the pump mounted. We'll get its little sock mounted. And you gotta compensate for that. Do not jam the sock into the bottom. It needs to float by about 1/8 of an inch. And we'll get all those cut, and then I'll bring you guys back and show you how that works. Okay, sorry, just took a picture. So, we took our pump, laid our sock next to it, measured from there to this point. That was 4 3/8, which is 4.375. And we went ahead and subtracted that from 8.625, which is close enough. And that means that our main feed line, which is this heavy one, has to be 4.25 inches from this point down. Now, remembering the gasket thickness is going to bring us up. That's why I went with the 5/8 instead of the 9/16, because we got that little bit of the gasket. So I'm just going to take this, put a piece of tape, mark it, use my fun little cutters. Okay, so getting ready, and they changed this over the years. It used to be some bulkhead connectors, but now it's these little locking pass-throughs. But you want this to kind of kick away from the pump, because remember, this is warm returned fuel. So we've got that kicking off to the side on the return. This is our main feed, so this is the pump. I haven't put the sock on. I do that at the very last moment before it goes in. So now we'll just take these, you run them through the wire, and get them plugged in where they go. Come on. I don't have my glasses on, so I'm just guessing here. There we go. Always leave yourself a little bit of service loop for future repairs or future changes. And then this fuel tight connector, you'll tighten down. In this case, it happens to be a 3/8 inch, or probably 10 millimeter more realistically. But we'll get that nice and snug. Then we'll put the other one on. And we'll even put the last of these fancy zip ties on. And get a gasket all lined up. And we'll get her popped in. I'll show you that in a minute. Gasket time. This one's symmetrical. The one for the sender is not, so pay attention. And it's easier to slide this on now than it will be in a couple minutes when I put the filter on. So I've already opened it. Notice the filter's nice and tidy, ready to go on. Just pop that. Remember, these kind of only go on one time, and this has a little key, so it can really only go there. That's it. So we now gently fold the filter, she goes in, and we just play the wiggle wiggle game until it all goes down. There's that one. There's that one. It's easier. Okay. And then think about where you're putting it. If you look here, how would I route that? So we're probably pointing them straight out, but honestly, I think I'm going to go look under the trunk and see if I can go that way. I don't think I can. I think this is a spare tire well, so I have a feeling this is the direction I'm going, but I want to verify that. Okay. The other thing to note is these guys have screws that have little O-rings on them. So not only do you have the gasket, but there's a little O-ring on here. Let the gasket and the O-ring do their work. I'm pretty sure somewhere they give you a spec. Don't go crazy cranking these things down or they will leak. So I'm going to go get my tool and we'll go from there. Okay, it's actually been a little bit because the Dash 8 stuff doesn't fit on there as well as you would like. So we actually had to chuck this in the vise, file, turn, file. And even the screw, we had to pull it all back up, put a notch in the side of the screw, slide it in at an angle and get it all lined up. So we actually put a fitting on here just, hopefully you guys can see, to make sure it would all work, and it will. There isn't a lot of daylight, but there is some, and that's all we need. Okay, when we're doing the float setup, one of the first things I like to do, because these are not symmetrical, is figure out, one, the top side of the gasket, and two, how it's oriented. So I've got a mark here and a mark there, and then I lay it on here and rotate it around until I get it to line up with the screws. And now I know that that is pointing here. So this hole is the one that goes towards the front of the car. And that's very convenient because that means my float arm, hopefully you guys can see that, is way out here away from this filler towards this side of the tank. So it is stamped correctly. Okay, so in our case, our instructions said that our pivot point right here has to be 4.5 inches down, which it now is, and I'll get this tightened, which meant we had to remove this little extension piece that was on here. No big deal, but when you do, the back side of the plastic grounds to the body. Make sure you ground that. You can't just go on this side. Now, be very careful that when you go to move this out, you don't let this turn because you're going to lose the wiper on the rheostat. So, just turn it, get it loose enough. I'll take it flat, float side in, and then in this case, in fact, I think they even show you a picture of how they want the float. No, they show a different kind of float. You got to think about how the float works. So see, it goes down and goes up. So we're going to have to set where it's going to be. It's going to be doing this. If you set it like that, you can see you just change the relationship. So you really do want this centered either like this or like that, because what we want is the center of this float to be here. But we also need it to come right there. So one way to do that is you just take, like here I got my little edge. So see, if I flatten that on the edge, turn that all the way up, and then snug that, that's going to give me a full tank and an empty tank. Full tank, empty tank. Remember, you got to cut this shorter, but I'll only cut it once you're certain you've got what you want. But yes, keep this centered or you're always going to be off that little bit. So see, empty, full, empty, full. And remember, we had it indexed that way, so it'll actually be sitting here like this, won't interfere with the pump, won't interfere with a wall. So then you just take, line everybody up, and this is part of why you got to shorten everything. Pay attention to where your screws go, make sure that all lines up. And then I'm actually going to start one, keep everybody happy. And then you get to play the fun game, getting everybody in. That's why they put those couple of extra little holes in there. So now, because we had taken the time to index it correctly, we have no problem getting it lined up. Okay, so unfortunately the fitting we ordered for here is on back order. I just checked and we don't have one on the wall. I know I have one at my shop, so it's not the end of the world. But yeah, what a weird fitting to have on back order. Of course, our fuel filter isn't here either, so you know, there's that as well. All right, and looking at it, you can see that's where the wiring went through for the fuel tank. You can see, gives me good access down, so that is most likely the same way I'm going to run the fuel pump leads and the filler lead. So they'll come up this side up here, and yeah, that'll work out pretty good. That's important to know, because I realize that you wouldn't want to think about wiring on a car like this yet, but it's going to be a lot easier to get this pre-wired and pre-terminated and up in here somewhere where we can get at it in the future, so we don't have to drop the tank just to hook all this up. So we'll get there. And with that, we think we're going to go ahead and test fit this, see if those straps are going to work for us, and see if there's any gotchas, and look and see what our clearances here are, because if I'm going to run wires forward, don't want them pinched. And it's always satisfying watching the cars go up. I don't know why. Okay, we do not remember where the hardware for this is, so we're going to just do some sketchy things, get it up in there, and then look through and see how that's going to go, and make sure these are even going to be in the ballpark. But yeah, that's going to be on somebody's homework this week, is to find that hardware. Okay, I'm liking the fit on this side. Let me go look at the fit on the other side. Okay, it looks like the tank might be a little twisty here on this side. I bet we're hung up on something, because this one looks a little short. Okay, we got that where both of those are now sitting correctly. We were jammed on something. And now, I'm going to review some footage in a minute, but I have a feeling we're actually hitting some fittings here, I think. So I'm going to review footage in just a moment, because you guys just got to see stuff I didn't. And then down in there as well. But you can see, it looks like a pretty reasonable fit here. Okay, and I thought looking at the footage that we were hard against this, but obviously we're not, because I can get that in there, and I can't there, and I can't there. So we are actually barely clearing the floor, but barely is all we need. And you can see now why I want to move almost immediately to the side where the fuel lines are going to be run. So we will get those running over here. And then I got to figure out how we're routing those and where that giant fuel filter is going to go. I really want it to be in a safe location. On the 55, I was able to mount it right here on the floor because it was big and flat. But I don't know that I'm going to have that luxury in the 78 Camaro. Gonna have to make that decision once I have it in hand, and unfortunately, it's on back order because, you know, that's the way the world is now. Everything's on back order. But the lines, the feed and return lines, we're going to run down here. And then I've got to figure out how we're getting them there. Don't want them anywhere near any of this. So they are going to have to turn here. And they're going to have to come around. And then they're gonna have to come back around here as well. And as tempting as it is to put the filter here, we're gonna have to have somewhere for mufflers too. So we'll work on that. But until I have it in hand, it's hard to map that out. Well, and that's about all we're gonna be able to do on that. We got some things to collect. And I know this looks close, but I bet I can fit at least one piece of paper here. Look at that, one thickness of paper. That's all we need. Okay, so he's definitely been at work in here. And with that, I think we're going to wrap up tonight's 78 Camaro video. We did a couple other things, but not much. A little planning, a little figuring things out. Hopefully, next time this goes in is the last time, but there's some painting to do and a little cleanup, and obviously we still got to get this other fitting. Would really like to know where I'm putting that fuel filter before making the hoses. So, you know, there's a few things to figure out. So, anyway, I'm going to toss it to ShopRex. Thanks for watching. ShopRex says, drink responsibly.